Hey guys! So my friend introduced me to this game called Tiny Glade that just released their demo version, and I was really excited to try it out. I made a few cute builds to start off with, nothing really big. And then I kept seeing some really insane builds in this game that I had no idea that it was possible to make. And then I had the great idea that I should combine this with my main thing, block game. If anyone knows me, sees the aesthetic of my channel, you'll see that I do a lot of Minecraft. So today, we're gonna build something cool in Tiny Glade, and then we're gonna try to recreate it in Minecraft. This video is dedicated to my friend Robin, who introduced me to this game by retweeting one of the dev showcase that the developers of Tiny Glade put out back when Bird App was still Bird App and not X. And that's how I found it. I've been following it since. It's been really, really interesting to watch this game develop and get new features over the last few months, and it's even cooler to finally try it. Tiny Glade is just this really super cute, cozy cottagecore type building game where you have this little clearing in the woods and you place down buildings and terrain and paths and foliage and all these things and combine them all together to create some adorable dioramas. And then they have a photo mode that you can mess with and settings, give it like a miniature set kind of like it's really, really cute. I like messing with it a lot. Um, like I said, this is the demo version of the game, so not all the features are unlocked. There's some that are still in progress, but that doesn't mean that there's not still a lot to work with. So, getting started on the Tiny Glade version of this build, I wasn't actually sure what I was going to do. This was my fourth build about that I'd actually attempted in the demo. All the previous builds that I've been shown were all still me, and I'd seen other people share like miniature towns built up on mountainsides that most people probably say that it's kind of a Studio Ghibli backgrounds-esque kind of thing, but they actually remind me more of towns that I went to when I lived in Italy. I grew up an American military child, so for 10 out of 16 years, that was the last time that I moved back to the US. I lived in a few different European countries, and we traveled a lot. So a lot of these ancient Italian towns that would date back to the Roman Empire, they'd be built on precarious mountainsides and cliffs, and sometimes the only access point would be like bridges or just have to climb like 1,000 stairs. I'm not even joking. And minus the amount of stairs that would take, I decided that I wanted to try to build one of these towns in a video game. So I started making it. First few buildings were just plopped down randomly to get the general idea of where I wanted things to go. Then I tried making the gate, and as you can see, I had quite a bit of trouble getting it the way that I want it to work. But I ended up getting it in the end with a combination of towers and the walls. You'll see me fiddling with the windows and doors occasionally because whenever you click on one after you've placed it, if it spawned props, it'll cycle through them, and there's a lot of cute props. And for the gate windows, I didn't want a clothesline, but I did want some kind of prop outside the gate. But it really wanted to try to get me to get a connected clothesline between the two windows, which is super cute. But I eventually just settled on one without anything, and I got it to work. While I was making the gate, I figured out how to make this really cute pavilion type thing with combining a building and a path, and so I threw that together here because I really wanted one. I imagine it being like some kind of stable. Anyway, from there, I kind of went back to the original houses that I just placed down at the beginning, and I gave them some more details because one of the things that I realized with this game is that it's really good for you to start with a box. And it's good about teaching yourself how to build kind of thing because you have some really simple tools, but with it, you can combine them together and make them interact in different ways. But ultimately, it's just squares and circles for most of these things, and it's figuring out how to combine squares and circles to make a bunch of different stuff. I think that's really, really cool. It's actually something I want to send to my friends that say they can't build, but they want to learn. I'm like, play with this free demo. You can learn, and you get kind of a lot of the fundamentals of it. Um, anyway, I struggled with this window forever because I wanted it to be like a triple window, but have like clotheslines on each one, but not have it be the triple like the bay window, and it didn't let me do that. So eventually, I figured out something else. I kept wanting to figure out ways to maybe include like draping the clotheslines across between windows, because that is the thing you can do. If you put windows on different buildings close enough together, then they'll connect with a clothesline between them, but I couldn't get them to work. Anyway, enough with the clotheslines. I put these windows down and then promptly deleted them on one side and put like a tower balcony thing instead, because I wanted just more height variation there. It's a lot about this of kind of it's making it seem busy but also seem cozy is kind of the thing here, is that you want a lot of like closed spaces and things going on, but still have like there be a path in between them. It was interesting to try to figure out how to get those details to all work together. But I think that adding the round tower and the balcony ends up being like a really cute like community almost central area between three different balconies at the end. All right, moving on. I set up these walls to try to use the foliage. Is that how you say that word? Foliage, the pretty flowers tool to make some kind of a crop field sort of thing. And it didn't quite work because the bushes are really bushy, but they reminded me of the lavender fields in Provence, France, where that's where a lot of stuff comes from. And my family did a week-long trip there. And it was really pretty. And so I kind of wanted to mimic that with the fields that I did. Um, and then that was just a quick pit stop. I didn't, after this point, I was kind of just winging it again. I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing with the buildings, just other than, oh, I need a building to go here and make it go up. So this ends up being like a guard tower where the path goes underneath the tower. I was kind of up along the border for the rest of this though, so things get kind of wonky when I'm trying to make them all make the sizes that I want fit into the demo's borders, which is perfectly fine. You still actually have a lot of space to work with. It's just a matter of figuring out how to make things go the way you want them to. I messed with the roofs because that's about the time that I realized that you could mess with the roof shapes. Other than like the dome, I thought you could just kind of change the dome a little bit, but I didn't realize, oh, you can make them go into. So then I tried figuring out what kind of shapes I want, because the making go in gives them, or make them like balloon out, gives more of a quaint feel, and then in gives more. I always think it was more of like a fairy elvenish sort of thing. I messed with this door forever trying to get the right props because I didn't want a flower basket on the guard tower. I wanted there to be a ladder or a basket or the wagon wheels would end up settling with. And then I put down a final tower that's literally just for decoration, but I got to use the clothesline trick that I've been trying to use this entire time. So it looks really cute. There's a little bit of a something going on. After this point, it was once again, I wasn't really sure what I was doing. So I ended up fiddling with a couple things, adding lanterns on places that I knew needed some more light. Because when it turns nighttime, windows will light up to add a visual interest. But you also just want some lanterns on the outside areas so places that aren't buildings also can be lit up. So I added some to the gates, to a couple of the walls that didn't do it, one in the middle by the garden. And then from there was kind of the part that I was dreading. 'Cause this is the part I really didn't know what was going on, of making the building at the top of the hill. And that was, I knew I kind of wanted it to be some sort of grander building, some sort of building to leave an impression. And so I started with putting down foundations first and foremost, and figuring out how to squish this all in to the top of the hill, because I was working on some very limited space. I did not quite give myself enough room for what I wanted to do, but I put down some foundations and just kind of started winging it again. A lot of my process is winging it and see what happens. Decided at some point or another that I was going to make this like some kind of a church build, but in order to really maximize the space, I needed to be lining this up way close to the border of the demo again. So I just continued putting down blocks as foundations and tried to keep going from here. This is about the point where I decided that I was going to make this as some kind of church building, but I had to get it lined up properly first and foremost. But I didn't really go into detailing the rest of the building because I decided that I also wanted, instead of another big tower for the circular part, I wanted to make it the final balcony that I talked about previously. So the way to do that is that you kind of put a building down at an elevation so it gets the stands or it's just not at the ground level. And then you can go in and adjust the heights of both the foundation and the upper part. And it took a lot of time to fiddle with this because I wasn't sure how tall I wanted it without it looking kind of stupid. Because in theory, this would be like your tallest part of the build, and it didn't quite end up being that. It kind of ended up being basically the same height as the other circular balcony, but it's got more visual interest in that final hole. So I think it works out well. And I kind of imagine this being of a lookout place or maybe more of a place of worship almost as part of the church. And then this is where I go back and detail the sort of the chapel part of it and put down windows, uh, and some more lanterns, and then I go back and do more windows. The windows took forever to figure out because I had to make them all look even, and then I had to get them all to be. I didn't want any decorations with them. I wanted them just to be the basic windows. Because imagine, in theory, this would be like stained glass or something like that, which I thought was kind of fun. But it took forever of clicking on windows in order to get them to not have any props associated with them at all. But after that, that's kind of the last thing that I did. I just added a couple more details here and there. Like, oh, I add the big last thing I do is that on the top of the tower, I add one square part that adds kind of some cool final pillars. And that was just really just another decorative overhang to break up the big flat wall of that cylinder. Otherwise, that's really it. And here's the final result. I'm really happy with this, the way that all the buildings work, and it adds kind of the cluttered, cozy feeling that I was talking about. You can go in and change some of the color palettes, but I ended up liking just the default color palette the best. I didn't even I messed with it on other builds, but on this one, it's like, you know what, I just want the nice white stucco and the red bricks. And it's as simple as sometimes the default is the best way to go. That if it's got the aesthetic and it works, why mess with it? At this point, I think that we're done with the Tiny Glade part of this project, and it's time to hop into Minecraft and try to see how we can recreate it there. I start off by just throwing down some rocks in the rough places that I did for the initial ones because I knew I would be editing them later, and then I went to working on the main gate. The main gate was important because it was going to be the starting place for all of my builds for both spacing and for figuring out block palettes. I started off using andesite in order to place my initial blocks down. I honestly don't remember why, it just was. And then I used a tool called Axiom to change the andesite into my block palette, which ended up being white terracotta, endstone, sandstone, and smooth sandstone, as well as stripped birch. I also tried to use stripped jungle, but that ended up being just too many block colors. So later I take the stripped jungle out. As you can see here, I also decided to set up some of the decorations. This is also important because I was trying to figure out the window style, which is going to be consistent on all of the buildings from here on out. From here, I started with just kind of putting down the initial circle for the little storehouse and working on the pavilion. These two were going to help me establish my scale for the rest of the build, as well as I would be figuring out my roof shape momentarily. I ended up using a gradient of bricks, raw granite, cut granite, and copper for the roofs, and for the circular buildings that had a little knobby on top, I just put a block of chiseled stone brick and a stone brick wall on top just as the decoration. You'll see throughout this entire build that I have to figure out how to do each roof individually because each of them are different shapes, yes, but also a lot of them are different slopes. So I'm trying to figure out how to recreate the slope in the direction that the roof seam goes, and figure out the more nuances along the way. But after I finish the pavilion and the storage house, I start to move on to the first building, setting up the initial wall and working on basically just the outlines, again using andesite that I will turn into my brick combination later. And I ended up using mushroom stem for the walls because it's really easy to get creative with everything being infinite. And using the fact that the brick pattern that I'm using is already very noisy to add a lot of the texture detail there while not overwhelming the rest of the walls that are in Tiny Glade. They're a pale stucco color with kind of some peeling and cutaways here and there. I decided not to include that just out of the sake of simplicity, that I couldn't find anything that really gave that effect without it being too big and taking up too much wall space. Hop back and forth between making the tower and the windows on the side of the building for a bit because I wasn't entirely sure how to do either of them, and they were kind of tied together. Drawings were really easy, being just double spruce doors to match Tiny Glade's doors, but the windows were causing me trouble because of the fact that they were fully outlined in wood in Tiny Glade, and I didn't really have anything to kind of get that same sort of feel in Minecraft. So I used different, depending on the place, trapdoors or fences, along with an overhang that even if it didn't give the exact thing that Tiny Glade did, it gave it close enough to the impression and it made it look nice for not having flat walls everywhere. The tower's roof, I made it go more straight up by including full blocks, and then I used full blocks as well on the roof of the straight part to mimic the sort of diagonal ceiling that was along the corners in the Tiny Blade version. And after I textured a little bit, I was pretty much done with that part. The next part that I worked on was more of the wall, really just as an in-between to section off the rest of my build, and I was planning to come back at the end and add in the foliage that went into the garden here, but I didn't want to do it now where I didn't have all of the buildings placed yet. So I threw down the wall real quick, textured it with Axiom, and then put in the brick walls that sectioned off the crops, and put in a couple of decorations that I'm going to be doing along the way this entire time, just small things here and there like the lampposts and the buckets, and then I went to working on where the guard post was going to be. The guard tower I knew was going to be tricky because of how the path ran underneath the tower as well as on an incline. So I put down the basic outlines, expecting to be changing it somehow later. I didn't actually change it as much as I expected in the end. Once I moved the roof up a block or two, and then I was just able to paint everything with the right textures and throw on the floor, and I continued with the rest of the tower. Glad that after this there wasn't too much more with the spacing and sizing issues that I had to deal with, because that was something that really bothered me in Tiny Glade, with how I wasn't able to get things quite the way I wanted to. Tower door was once again a problem. In Tiny Glade, it was keeping another flower pot from showing up. That came up so often. But here I was figuring out how to make this stupid double door. I still don't think I did it right, but I cannot figure out how I normally do corner doors. And it's driving me crazy. Genuinely, I don't know what I was doing. The roof here, I messed up with the having the corner showing at first, but a quick little fix of making everything into corner stairs and texturing it real quick, and thankfully we were past this pretty quickly. The second smaller tower was pretty much purely just for decoration of having the one window where they connect. I would imagine it's probably some type of storage silo, like the little one down below, but maybe of a more of a long term or of different produce. At this point, I was starting to get the hang of painting something with the bricks texture and putting windows in to make it look nice. So making the decorated cylinder at this point was pretty quick and easy. This next building is just another miscellaneous house, but I really like it. The bay window and the balcony are just so cute. I, I want everyone to know that I put a :3 in my script, which I forgot about until now. So this is improv. I just completely forgot. It took me by surprise, but there wasn't a period. Gosh, there's not really much to say about this build, is there? It just kind of exists. It's got the balcony, it's got the window, it's got a ladder and a door. It was one of the first things that I built on the Tiny Glade version, and I expected to fill the space in more around it. So I kind of forgot to go back and fill it in to make it better, but it is what it is. It's cute. I genuinely, that's probably my favorite build, is just the one in the middle. I just like balconies. I like the balconies. I like the fact that I can plant flowers on it in theory. I wish that I had more ability to control to add extra planters, but I don't at the moment because it's just a demo version. So it is what it is. Now for the builds I've been dreading. Between the need for terraforming I wasn't sure how to do, the weird placement and angles that the Tiny Glade version had, and all these specific details I didn't realize I was making so hard for myself, the church and its tower were, well, maybe not the most difficult part of this build, were setting up to be the most frustrating. I started by just throwing down some stairs that I, again, was probably figuring that I was going to be changing later, and starting on the skeleton of the church building itself. The windows the first time around I didn't make accurate to the Tiny Glade version because I didn't have the space to make them the 2x2 windows that I initially wanted them to be. I do change this later, thankfully. Don't worry about it. It annoyed me too. The next thing I started to do was trying to figure out the placement of the big central tower. I quickly realized that I did not build this conveniently in Tiny Glade, and I was probably going to have to do some problem solving in order to make it work in Minecraft. It was also getting pretty late into the night. I think it was probably 11:30 or midnight when I was building this part, and I was making more and more silly mistakes that I wouldn't have made if I wasn't sleep drunk. But I wanted to get this all in one replay mod take, so on I went. I start by once again building up the outline of the tower, as it goes with everything, and I promptly cut this to appear that I left a clip. I didn't realize that. Good job, me. You didn't miss much, don't worry. What's on the screen now is the new current status. So I'm flying around here. I am contemplating if the church's height is as currently acceptable, or if it's going to bother me too much. I clearly decided it needed to be taller and made the fixes as much as I really didn't want to do the extra work. But it lets me fix the window shapes, and genuinely, I'm really glad that I did make the change because the church's body not being hidden by the cute house is so much better composition. We're finally in the end stages. That was the last full build, and since we've already done a lot of the decor as we went, all that's left to do is to add some greenery to this place. I used Axiom's replace tool to put down a layer of grass over the bare stone instead of having to break and replace every single block. I finally get to put in this cute flower garden. I've been wanting to do this entire time, but I didn't have the space for it yet. That garden really fixed the more of that area than I was expecting it to, because that space is much smaller in Tiny Glade, but it perfectly balances and closes off the sidelines of the Minecraft version. Foliage tool in Tiny Glade currently only puts down these really big bushes with tall lavender flowers, which don't really exist in Minecraft very well. Tried messing around with a few things, but ended up just deciding to use pitcher pots and torch flowers. The Stay True texture pack that I'm using adds variants for both these plants, but both the vanilla and variants of the torch flowers worked great. At this point, I was deciding to nitpick on details and change the window's glass color, but in doing so, I accidentally turned off all the lights that I had already manually turned on. But as I went around and changed the glass color and turned the lights back on, I thought it looked just like how the lights flick on over time once it turns nighttime in Tiny Glade. Isn't it pretty? The last thing I decided to add was something I initially wasn't going to do. The vines I thought were going to be too clunky on the side of a bunch of the different builds, but when some of the walls were looking kinda bare, I decided to do them anyway. I really like using the candles as small clumps of leaves while the azalea leaves did the rest of the spatial work. Last but not least, I need to make this into a glade. I used Axiom to spawn in a bunch of oak and birch tree schematics from Luna Herobrine on Planet Minecraft, and continued the path to really finish off the entire build. At this point, it was 1 in the morning, I had been building for 5 hours straight, and as much as I was really happy with this build, it was time for me to sleep. say thank you to everyone that's made it this far into the video. I haven't made one of these videos before, so I know it's a little bit all over the place, but I saw the Tiny Glade and I had this idea and I really, really wanted to do it. And so this was a good like week and a half worth of effort for me. Things keep getting in the way, Minecraft wouldn't load. Voiceover was a struggle. My microphone is slowly dying. I'm sorry about that. But just gonna keep going and figure things out one step at a time. So until next time, best of luck to you. Thank you again.